All right, let's dive into one of America's most infamous and, permanently unsolved murder cases. It's an incredible story of brutal violence that just completely shattered the quiet, proper world of the Victorian era, and it left behind a legacy where the myth, the story, totally won out over the actual legal verdict.
I'm willing to bet you've heard this one before. This chilling little rhyme is what most of us know. It's pure folklore that basically convicted Lizzie Borden in our minds more than any courtroom ever could. The crazy part? As we're about to see, it's not even factually correct.
Yeah, because behind that simple, catchy rhyme is a story that is so much messier. You've got family drama, simmering resentment, worries about money, a mountain of circumstantial evidence, and, in the end, a court decision that left pretty much nobody satisfied. It was the perfect storm for a legend to be born.
Okay, so picture this. It's a brutally hot August morning in the factory town of Fall River. Inside what looks like a totally respectable home on 2nd Street, a discovery is about to be made that's going to shock and fascinate the entire country.
And the contrast here is just jarring. On the outside, the Bordens were a well-off family, though they were known for being incredibly cheap. But inside that house, investigators walked into a scene of unbelievable brutality. Andrew Borden was found hacked to death on his own sofa, and his wife Abby had been murdered upstairs. The violence was just so savage, so personal.
Now check out how tight this timeline is. It creates this incredibly small window for the murders to happen. Andrew leaves for work, and he's back in less than 2 hours. And then, just about 30 minutes after he gets home, Lizzie is yelling for help, saying an intruder killed her father. But get this, her stepmother, Abby, had actually been killed before Andrew even got back home.
So police are looking around. There's no sign of a break-in, and nothing was stolen. Suspicion almost immediately falls on the only other person we know was in that house when both murders happened: Andrew's 32-year-old unmarried daughter, Lizzie.
And right here, this is the core conflict of the whole case. On paper, Lizzie Borden is the last person you'd ever suspect. I mean, a Sunday school teacher, a pillar of the community. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? Beneath that respectable surface, things at home were bad. She and her sister deeply resented their stepmother, Abby, because they were convinced she was just after their dad's fortune.
This was the question, the one that hung over the entire investigation, the trial, everything. Could a woman of her standing, a so-called angel in the house, really be capable of picking up an axe and committing such a ferocious, violent act? Now, the case the prosecution built was powerful, but here's the catch. It was all circumstantial. There was no smoking gun. So you've got motive, right? The inheritance. You've got opportunity. She was there. Her alibi about being out in the barn starts to look real shaky when investigators found the thick dust up in the loft was completely untouched. Then you add in her trying to buy poison the day before and her burning a dress a few days later, which she claimed was stained with paint, and well, the prosecution felt like they had their killer.
Of course, this thing goes to trial, and it just explodes. It became a full-on national media circus. We're talking newspapers all across the country covering every single detail, turning Lizzie Borden from just a local murder suspect into a household name.
The whole trial really boiled down to these two competing stories. The prosecution methodically laid out all the evidence we just went over, but the defense? They took a totally different approach. They focused almost entirely on who Lizzie was. Their argument was pretty simple. A good, pious, well-bred woman like Lizzie was just psychologically and even physically incapable of doing something so monstrous. Then, bam, the prosecution gets hit with a massive blow. Remember that whole story about her trying to buy poison? The judge rules it inadmissible. He throws it out. Just like that, one of their key pieces of evidence for premeditation was gone, and their case got a whole lot weaker.
So after weeks and weeks of testimony and all this drama, how long do you think the all-male jury took to decide her fate? 90 minutes. That's it. It just goes to show you how much the defense's argument about her character worked. The jury just couldn't imagine that the woman they saw in court could be the brutal killer the prosecution was describing.
So Lizzie Borden walks out of the courthouse a free woman. Case closed, right? Nope. Not even close, because this is really where the story gets interesting. The court of law and the court of public opinion were about to deliver two very, very different verdicts. There it is. The legal system had spoken. The state had failed to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Officially, in the eyes of the law, Lizzie Borden was innocent.
But the public, well, they had a different idea. And their verdict came almost immediately, in the form of that creepy nursery rhyme. It spread like wildfire, 1890s style, and it cemented her guilt in everyone's imagination for good, even though it gets the number of whacks and her relationship to Abby totally wrong.
After the trial, Lizzie got her inheritance, a lot of money, and she moved to a fancier part of town. But it didn't matter. She was never accepted. She was acquitted, yeah, but she was never really cleared in people's minds. She lived the rest of her life as an outcast in her own town, forever branded by a crime the court said she didn't commit.
Which really brings us to the biggest question of all, right? It's been over a century. Why are we still so obsessed with this case? Why can't we let Lizzie Borden go?
Well, I think the answer is actually pretty simple. The court case never gave us a satisfying conclusion. She was acquitted, but there were no other real suspects, no definitive answers. It just left this huge open question hanging in the air. And, nature abhors a vacuum. That empty space is where all the speculation, the theories, and the folklore rushed right in.
I mean, think about it. This story has all the perfect ingredients. It's the ultimate unsolved mystery. It challenges all those strict Victorian ideas about women and social class. But I think the most powerful part, the really terrifying idea, is that the monster isn't some intruder from the outside. The monster could be the quiet, respectable person living right there in the house with you. Lizzie was no longer just a defendant. She became an American folk villain.
At the end of the day, the Lizzie Borden case isn't just a true crime story anymore. It's become a genuine American ghost story. Its real power comes from that uncertainty, the feeling that the answer is so close you can almost touch it, but you'll never, ever be able to truly grasp it.
So, I'll leave you with this thought to chew on. The court delivered its verdict in just 90 minutes, but the story, the rhyme, the legend, the endless mystery, that's lasted for over 130 years. It really makes you wonder which one has the final say, doesn't it?